Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday, and thanks for joining us for another exciting AlphaNooner. We're excited to welcome back Margaret Brodie, CEO of Rubicon Organics, to talk about some exciting company highlights, as well as give us some insight into the Canadian market. I even wore today a Canadian tuxedo to honor the occasion.
Love it.
Little top, get in the mix. But thanks so much for joining, Margaret. Really appreciate it. It's always great having you on. I think, again, you bring a ton of insight and a ton of kind of positivity into the space, which is fantastic, well earned. I will say, if anyone is out there and is joining us, one, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. But two, if you have any comments, questions you want to throw in the chat, always encourage you to join the conversation. Margaret is fantastic and is very knowledgeable, so definitely take advantage of this time if you have some good questions out there. So with all that said, I think a good place to start for this go around is, it's been a while, and I think there are some new kind of people who have been interested in cannabis. I know there are a few people who are following the cannabis space very, very closely, but I think there's still piquing some interest kind of more broadly. So I'd love to start with sort of a table set. So maybe can you give us sort of the rundown, refamiliarization with Rubicon a little bit?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me on. Rubicon Organics, who are we? We are Canada's #1 premium licensed producer, and we have a house of premium brands. We have 3 flagship brands: Simply Bare Organic, our super premium, flavor forward, beautiful genetics, 1964 supply, which is premium and speaks to the legacy consumer. We're really trying to bring legacy market into the legal market. And then Wildflower, which is really a wellness focused brand. We're actually the world's leading scaled premium and organic cannabis company. We have a really unique IP around that. We're based in Delta, BC, which is BC Bud. Actually, if you're familiar with Village Farms or Pure Sun Farms, we're just down the road from them. We're listed on the TSXV. And last year, we had an incredible recognition in December at what I like to call the Oscars of Canadian Cannabis, the KIND Awards. We won every major category. So we won Brand of the Year, Flower of the Year, Vape of the Year, Hash of the Year, Topical of the Year, Edible of the Year. We won Best New Product of the Year. Simply Bare won the write-in from bud tenders. And this is all driven by industry bud tenders, and they're the most discerning of consumers, so we really care. We're in our 3rd year of profitability. We like to go out, do something, focus on it, do it well. 2 years ago, we launched edibles, created the premium edibles category, now have around 30% of that category. Last year, we launched vape. Within 6 months, not only did we win those awards with our vapes, we got 55% national distribution on it, and it's just been tremendous. So we are focused on quality. We believe that it all comes to trust and quality in your brand and what you do. And we don't sell anything that we can't stand behind. From an investor point of view, Canada's been, I think, not looked at closely in the last couple of years and had a few tough years. But as a result of that, companies that are still here are lean, are clear. They have a right to win. And we spent that time laying foundations in our business. On-scaling the team, refinancing our debt, which is at 6.75%. It's there for a rainy day, and we're going to talk in a minute about the rainy day growth opportunity that we're using it for. So lots of good things happening.
That's fantastic. Yeah, definitely. When I think of you guys, it definitely feels like an unrelenting drive towards quality, towards just working and improving the business all the time. I think you guys are constantly on it. And again, great to hear on the award side. Winning the Oscars is kind of a fun, staple to put it in. Did you have to give a speech or go up or do anything, or
not this year? We did last year. We won a bit the year before, but now we're like, it matters so much to us because the bud tender in Canada everything's behind the counter, and the bud tender does is the one who does the recommend. So for them to acknowledge us is just, it's winning hearts and minds with what we do and quality and what we stand for. So it makes me really proud, and really for our team, Yeah,
no, I think that's fantastic. Having a strong team is super important. And I think being able to share that praise and I think recognition is super important with the whole team. And again, I think that's shown up in terms of stock performance and everything like that. I know you guys have been able to pull out a positive year to date so far, which is fantastic and definitely impressive, I think, in the current cannabis world. So that's fantastic. I did want to touch on what you were mentioning earlier, which we kind of touched on Twitter, if anyone was following our interaction. You had some very exciting news this week. What can you tell us about your exciting news?
Well, we have signed a purchase and sale agreement to buy a facility about an hour and a half from our existing one. It's an operational, purpose-built indoor facility. It has produced premium product before. It was actually British Columbia's first licensed facility, which is kind of cool that we're going to now own it. but it increases our capacity by about 41% for in my view, a steal of a price. I think we nailed timing, nailed the seller, everything just came together in the right moment. It's why we had dry powder. Having money isn't a reason to spend it on the right things for the right growth opportunities. And this is what this is. My team is just buzzing. We're expecting to have first harvests in 2025. It's a step change for us. And to me, it's the first step on the journey to growing a much bigger, more powerful company, which I believe we can build the most trusted and admired Canadian cannabis company. And that's what we're looking to do. But it's all off the back of quality. So this isn't about just pumping out volume and yield. It's about real consumer insight with beautiful product that is consistently done and building trust with your customers.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And again, that sort of has the staying power for brands over time, for sure, that trust element. So I know you guys are constantly monitoring sort of the landscape to try to find, where are opportunities, where are things that you can kind of spring on. I know you said this was sort of a steal of a deal for you guys, which is fantastic. Was that the only factor that made you push towards actually saying, hey, let's actually pursue this, rather than this is just sort of on the table and something we're keeping an eye on?
Great question. Look, we've looked at a lot of things over the last couple of years. We continue to. This is not one and done. As I said, we want to get bigger with the right assets and the right thing. I always said we'd be opportunistic. This was opportunistic. I think for us, there's more to come. Watch this space, but this asset makes so much sense with our existing footprint and where it's located. Look, I'd love to be over 20 to 30,000 kilos of premium, not just weed, because anybody can just grow fine weed. Growing beautiful premium weed to a high standard in a very competitive market is actually, and we'll talk about it later, I'm sure, really springboards into global competitiveness, competitive advantage, and what really builds premium brands over the long term in cannabis, not just in Canada, but internationally. So I think I won't tell you all my secrets. I never do.
Of course.
But we're investing in a number of things. One would be genetics. We think genetics are going to be a very important part of the future of cannabis. You're going to start to see from Rubicon, starting actually in the second quarter. And I was in our facility and I was sending some photos to some friends of ours in the industry, Todd Harrison being one of them, last night, showing him some of the new drops that are coming, because we've got something called Pink Drip that's going to go into Simply Bare, that is, and white, Sunset Runt, that we're arguing internally which one's more beautiful, because the importance of genetics cannot be undersold. Selling, having the right one. So our Blue Dream, there's lots of Blue Dreams out there. Our cut of Blue Dream is a beautiful cut. We've got some really beautiful legacy strains. We honor them. We want the consumer to have them, but there's a lot more to do and a lot more to come. We don't want to just take one popular genetic and cross it with a whole bunch of things we want to be leading and innovating on genetics and what's to come. So I think the story over the next few years and the value of that in the marketplace is only going to grow, not just in Canada, but around the world, because there's going to be a real need for that. So I think that's a future story. Today, I would say it's a hint of what I think is to come, but I don't think it's yet valued.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I think it seems like a present and future story in terms of, I think you guys are very on top of trying to build out that genetic not footprint. I don't know what you would call it. Spread, I guess, ultimately.
Yeah.
But
library. I don't know.
Library. I like that. That's good. It's got leaves. There's something there. That's fantastic. And you mentioned, I think, the harvest getting done the first harvest expected this year, which I think is pretty fast and impressive to get that done. Were things kind of ready to go? What kind of adjustments are required to kind of make it?
So we're not going to close the facility until, I'm sorry, I cut you off, until midway through the second quarter, pending timing, et cetera, making sure we do things right. We've got to make sure that we have our ducks in a row. The biggest question mark for us will be, how long will it take Health Canada to put a license in there? And it could be very, very quick, but I'm gonna protect and say it's going to take a few months from when we close the facility, but it's the right facility for us. So if it takes an extra month to get the right systems and the right things in place to grow premium quality flower, that's great. We're going to put a little bit of money into it, not that much, probably just over $1 million. And there's some working capital, which will obviously, impact us this year. But for 2026, I think the runway, and plus what we'll talk about in a few weeks with our Q4 on some of the cost saving plans we have, I think we're really getting to a fantastic run rate in terms of what the business can do. It's if the product quality, the first few harvests when you're in any new facility are never your top quality. And I think everybody thought you'd turn on a facility and it would be banging from the day one.
Sure.
No, we've got an experienced team. We know we're gonna ramp things up. 6 rooms at a time or 10 rooms at a time. There's something like that. But we have outlets for all the product, and we're gonna plan the downside. And I think there's some quiet. Yeah, I think we can do it right out of the gate. Well, we'll see. It's my challenge I'd give to my team. But what I want to do is get the facility humming in the right way for the long term. By long term in cannabis land, that's in 6 months. I want it humming really beautifully from first plant.
Yeah.
We always talk about dog years in cannabis, right?
It is true.
Yeah. So I think, but I have high confidence we're going to get it in a great place. And it's because if you look on whether it's my LinkedIn or on Twitter, a lot of people saying that facility used to turn out great flower. Yes, that was a great facility. I'm so glad you guys have it.
Nice.
And it's been really nice to have the BC community and the Canadian cannabis community say, you guys were the right people to buy it. That is fantastic. I'm excited. We've had a lot of inbound CVs and all that kind of stuff of people saying, oh, I'm so excited you guys got this asset. So not only was the price absolutely fantastic for us,
Sure.
I think the asset is the right asset, and it came up very quickly. Unfortunately, MetaPharm we bought for had the deal fall through on them. Opportunistic for us, right?
Yep. That competitive nature comes out. I think it makes sense in terms of finding the right fit. And again, I think ultimately having it in your hands and being kind of good stewards of it and being able to kind of pull from your experience to get it up and running really quickly, getting it up and running right is a super important thing.
Yeah.
And being able to provide, I think, more good cannabis to the area is, obviously very important. So we talked a little bit about genetics, but just sort of zooming out a little bit and talking about kind of supply in general right now. What's the relationship? Why is it important to kind of bring on more supply right now? Can you just kind of tell us a little bit more on that front?
I would say since January, let's just to give a story to this. January 20th, bless you, we had a board meeting, and 3 weeks later, I said, I sent a note to the board and said, we've had a tremendous shift once again in Canadian cannabis. And we predicted this in the fall. I think people thought it would come a lot quicker. The dynamics of what's happening in the market. We have an absolute lack of supply in the Canadian cannabis market, and we have a lack of premium supply even more than that. So what has happened with the last 3-4 years? A lot of companies have pulled away, shut down facilities, or never were able to actually grow in the first place. They'd spent millions and millions and hundreds of millions of dollars, and they couldn't get these facilities working. So there's really only a few teams that really know how to run these things. And what's happened is it's moved to a lot of contract manufacturing. Now, with the excise tax in Canada taking a chunk out of your revenue, a lot of companies are just completely exited the Canadian market, and they're selling internationally, which is great for Canadian growers. It's great for Canada's GDP, and we'll talk about that too in a minute.
Yeah.
Because it's actually an export, something we should be proud of. But what that means is those brands are coming off of shelf in Canada. So the opportunity to build brand in Canada is happening right now. If you are not on shelf in Canada now, getting back on is going to be difficult. All of the retailers have to buy through the provincial system. The provinces control the list. The provinces grade and score every LP, every licensed producer, and all of their brands based on what sells, do they deliver on time, very much like a Walmart or Costco style model. This is happening, and they said, we have too much product. So those lists they're actively shrinking the lists. So if you pull away, getting back on the list is incredibly difficult. I do believe at some stage we'll have excise reform. I don't know when that will be, but with a whole bunch of people pulling out of market, selling their product abroad, coming back on shelf is a lot more difficult. And we also have a lot of premium brands and a lot of brands that actually don't control their own supply. So wholesale prices are rising because there's competition from international markets. So if you've got a brand right now that is on shelf, and you're buying all your product in, your margin is getting squeezed and squeezed. So you're either going to have to raise price, or you're going to have to make less money, or potentially go to business. So the dynamic of controlling supply is not only the ability to take arbitrage on the international opportunity, but to stay and win on Canadian shelves, which is building brands and building customer loyalty today. We've also heard from a lot of retailers and a lot of people, they're frustrated that people are taking their weed out of Canada and not selling to the locals that supported them until now. So the dynamic is live. It's happening. There's more to come. I think it's exciting, but I think it's the beginning of price increases as well to the Canadian consumer. So Beena Goldenberg, a very respected CEO in the space, who's the CEO of Organigram OGI, she was on I think it was Bloomberg about 3 weeks ago, saying they've already taken price on one of their mainstream brands. So I don't know what will happen across the board. I think that if mainstream moves up, it gets a little closer to premium, and maybe we can convert more people in for a better quality product. So I think there's lots to play yet. But if you don't have your own supply, you're going to be in major trouble. And it's happening now.
More out of your control, I think, if you're not controlling your own supply. I think that makes total sense. In terms of the price, change or fluctuation, I feel like that's been a constant theme just across the board outside of cannabis, but just, prices raising up in the US and in Canada. In terms of consumers, does it seem like still, there's a flexibility or willingness to absorb those prices? Or do you think, like you're saying, it's maybe they're paying maybe a little bit more, but they're getting a premium thing, so they're getting more and kind of pushing them into the different categories?
Yeah, it really depends on the overall economy. We in Canada have seen inflation really slow down. So I think that last stat I saw was it was under 2%, sort of on a 12-month rolling, and it's been steady on that for a number of months. I think about around 6 months. Don't quote me on that, but something like that. So consumers have adjusted. Obviously, there's a big political thing, and I'd like to say I have a wonderful, wonderful American friends. I don't love the tariffs, but that is government and not our American friends. So let's be clear about that. Some of my best friends are American. So, I think that will have unintended consequences on our industry and on all industries, because if the consumer is feeling pinched, so for example, they're already saying apples and oranges are going up in the grocery store, it'll be the first price increase you see in 2 or 3 days. So the grocery store bill is one of the things that cannabis competes against. But how long is this going to last, etc.? I think we have to remember, I think our industry is somewhat insulated because of the international opportunity that's happening. So there's so many dynamics happening. And hey, when people are stressed, they need weed.
I was going to say, I think that is true in some way. I think it pulls it together. If you're picking between oranges, like an extra treat or something, versus like a good night's sleep or something like that, I think a lot of people would go to sleep. So that makes sense. All right, well, then would love to turn to kind of the wider environment, maybe starting with Canada. And then I do want to, talk a little bit about what's going on in the US and if that has any impacts kind of generally for Canada. But what can you kind of tell us about sort of the Canadian market as it stands kind of right now?
Well, the Canadian market is humming. It's actually grown more than we expected last year. So I think the growth was around 14% year on year, which was really good on top line. There's some big areas of opportunity to come. Quebec is going to open up their market to vape at the end of this year. That is huge. I think that the new consumer is coming into the legal market. And moving away from the legacy market. So it's like prohibition, but it's a little bit slower. And so, I still think we're going to have double-digit growth on a high number. And it's a big market in Canada. So, if the economy was continuing where it was without the trade wars that are happening, I think we'd have an unbelievable situation for Canadian cannabis this year. I still think it's great. I think the consumer, if that wasn't happening, would feel pretty bullish. And they were feeling pretty bullish, and we see it in spend. But it was interesting. One of our teammates was at a board of trade event yesterday, and it was all about consumer insights and the trends and what's happening. And one of the things that it talked about was brands building trust and the importance of brand moving away from price and volume and discount to you can trust my product, you can trust my company. And I think that's something we at Rubicon have been talking about for a long time. So people are willing to pay if they know the product they're going to get is great. And we talk to our team a lot about people have taken their hard-earned money and they trust us with that treat. So make it great every time. And I think that's a differentiator in cannabis. I think a lot of people grow what they want, throw it in a bag, get annoyed when someone doesn't buy it. And then, this is about professionalism and maturity in terms of where the industry is going. And so I think we're really starting to see that reflected in more and more companies. And we'd like to lead the way with trust with the brands and with consumer. And I think that is what's going to build where the Canadian industry goes. And we see that playing out with the sort of impacts of trade wars and how people are feeling with trust, And so I'm excited. And I think that's one of the reasons also why, if we think about what's to come in cannabis in the world, Canada is considered a trusted place. So our weed is more trusted because of the regulation, et cetera, than
That's
there's
okay.
no disrespect meant, but like the perception of Colombia, where there's been cocaine and various things out of, and cartel action, et cetera, versus a medically health candidate mandated weed going into somewhere like Germany. That's a whole different value proposition to people, especially if it's a medical product. And so we have to remember that around the world, this is a medical product. So it's going to be about trust, and patients want to deal with companies that they can trust, and brands and products that they can trust, especially if it's critical on dosing every time. So there's an element of that that's really important.
No, I think that makes sense. Trust being paramount. Definitely agree on that front. I do even think like a familiarity element. I just think with Canada and its kind of relationship to Europe, could be a benefit when you're kind of moving into Europe as well, just sort of that familiarity and again,
Yeah.
ultimately kind of trust. And again, I think your story around sort of the maturity element, I think people are less excited just to get their hands on cannabis because it is more accessible. It's moving into, having real refined tastes and, digging into brands, I think totally makes sense. From kind of an investor perspective, I feel like Canada had been viewed for a while, I think, as sort of like figuring it
Not
out. I think
trustworthy. Oh,
ultimately
yeah.
is
And not trustworthy in this, like, let's be real. I mean, I don't have to shy away from it, and I completely cut you off again, sorry.
no, jump
Um,
in. Good.
we ran fast and loose as a country. It was a land grab for money and lots of spending and chasing shiny balls and all the rest of that. But there are disciplined operators that exist, and those are the companies that are emerging. Some companies are going to get away with it because they have lots of money. But you can see, I mean, I think Aurora's results speak to, they made a choice, they made a strategy choice, they stuck to their knitting, they stayed out of the fray, and they're delivering. I think Rubicon's doing the same thing. There are a series of companies out there that are focused, and they're building their businesses, and they're building businesses for the future. And I think those are the companies that in a year's time, 18 months, you're going to look up and go, wow, oh gosh. And for Rubicon, the acquisition we've made is just the first step on us saying, we've laid foundation on brand, we've got the balance sheet, we've got the reputation, we've got the relationship with regulators, we're starting to influence, we've got the customer. Building all the building blocks to a real business, not just smoke and mirrors. And I think that is going to have value. One of the things that I think a lot of people don't realize is that internationally, there's a perception that a very large bud is premium. Okay,
Sure.
so they open up a package, doesn't necessarily mean the genetic, the smell, or any of that stuff. And now this isn't everyone, but on the whole, it's viewed as that's what premium is. But in a competitive, advanced market, like many of the US states are, like Canada is, you understand that it's the importance of the genetic, the terpene profile, the smell, the effect, what is the cross in the plants, etc. That's going to have incredible value, but I think that value is coming in 3 to 5 years when that consumer starts to understand it. They don't understand it today, and we've seen that journey in Canada, and we're gonna see that journey across other markets, and that's what's really exciting. I say to my team all the time, you guys are gonna be world leaders in something that people have we live this every day. We've gone through the absolute turmoil and downtime and tough times. We've lived it. We've learned how to be resilient. We know how to solve problems, and we understand the issues that come with cannabis. And we also understand you never compromise your brand quality for a product that's not good enough.
Yeah, no, I think that makes total sense. And I'm seeing a comment here, which is fantastic in terms of, what you're getting, that trust element, which is fantastic. I'm also seeing some good questions coming in, which I will get to at the very end really quickly. But I did just want to touch in on sort of the international exporting element. I think late in February last month, you guys had gotten an additional kind of key certificate, blah, blah, blah.
Certification.
Certification. Thank you.
Yeah.
For exporting. Can you kind of walk us through that, how that ties in, how that's a benefit as well? Thanks.
So what we have is called GACP, and it's an internationally recognized standard. There's also EU GMP. We are Canadian GMP. It's different than EU GMP, and there's a few to go into Europe. You have to go through one of those ports broadly to get in. In order to get to that port, you need to be GACP. Okay, so it's the first step in that process. There are lots of EU GMP ports, Portugal, Czech Republic, around Canada, etc. There are a number of companies that hold the designation. To us, it's something we've pursued in the past. We're an agriculture business, and we're focused on growing. Running a medical business with that, it's not necessarily our superpower, but GACP is a really important step to be able to go to the world. Rubicon's strategy is, you would have heard this from me before, because I am test and learn, date before you marry, do the things, check it all out. That's 2025 for us on international. And what you're going to see is us doing that, being out, learning who you can trust, who are the best parties, where do we want to be, who understands premium, who pays their bills, which is another big piece of this, if you're going to ship a product. And then look to 2026 when we have additional capacity coming out of Hope to say that's a growth strategy. We want to make sure that we're satisfying our Canadian customers. They're very important. And the halo of the brand reputation in Canada matters internationally. So, and we're proud to sell locally.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. Again, I think proud of being a Canadian brand, but being able to offer that to the world at some point, I think is, fantastic for sure.
Yeah.
All right, let me see really quickly. Oh, well, I did want to touch on this quickly. I don't know, we kind of alluded to it in some ways, but sort of with some of the political chaos that's going on, how much does that really have an impact for you guys? Not that much, I would imagine, but what's your...
Well, as I said, I think it's to the consumer.
Okay.
And if the economy isn't in a great shape, that's not great for anything that's a discretionary purchase. Sure. To some people, cannabis isn't discretionary, but to a lot of people, it's around the pricing and where they go into the pricing tiers, maybe. But with what's happening with the current dynamic of so many people coming out of the Canadian market, I don't know. We've been talking about trying to figure out how big that impact's going to be. That's where I think price increases, I don't know if the Canadian consumer could bear price increases across the board. But TBD how long this lasts. Look, I think this is a GDP builder for Canada, but it's not going to the US, it's going internationally. So we should be something that the government of Canada is leaning into to say, hey, this is an opportunity for us to take a global competitive advantage. And if the US is going to take their sweet time to legalize, we're going to take advantage of that, because you guys are going to be heck of competition for us. We know that.
That is true. I hope so. We'll see. We'll see. But in the meantime,
Game on.
I know, that's true. I love it. Competitive. It's awesome. All right, let me see really quickly. Oh yes, we don't even want to talk about the 51st state stuff. I think that's not going to happen, but I don't know what's going on that front.
You know what? Right. I'm just getting trolled. I'm getting trolled, and I love it. I have to say, we took you at hockey recently. We were very excited. There was a great photo that went up through Canada where there was a battle of an injured Canada goose against a bald eagle.
I saw that.
And the eagle flew away. So, but look, Americans are our best friends. That's not changing for
I hope so.
a spat that we're having now.
I hope so. I hope so. All right, some good questions. I'm going to hit 3 here, which are some interesting ones. Braindead is asking, what do you do with leftover produce or resources? Any recycling, anything there? Kind of an interesting.
So 2 parts of that. One is we use whole plant. All of our products, everything is used. So I like to say we turn hash into cash. My team laughs and thinks I'm lame, but effectively parts of the plant that we can't use for other things, because our plants are very terpene rich from the living soil and the organics. It puts into a very flavorful hash product, but also all the trim can go into extraction for our vape products. So everything is used from an actual more ESG perspective. And I know those are kind of dirty words right now, but to me, ESG isn't about like DEI and all that stuff. It's actually about doing the right thing. So when you talk about the E in that, it's how much energy are you using, because that's your energy bill. Recycling and waste coming off our site, we track that in our ESG report. We're going to come up on our 5th annual this year. So I think we're the only cannabis company in the world doing that. Yeah. I don't want a ton of waste coming from our facility, because it means we're buying too much and we're not using things effectively. So this is, and then on the social side, it's, are our people happy? Are we paying fair wages? That is about competition, keeping people, etc. And governance is table stakes. So those are, to me, the 3 on ESG. The waste and recycling, one of the things we do, which I think arguably you could call waste, is when something doesn't meet the standard for Simply Bare Organic or 1964, and we've grown it for we only grow for those 2 brands. We have a 3rd flower brand called Homestead. Homestead, there's only product available to it when it doesn't meet the quality standard of one of our others, or it ages, or the smell is slightly off. Everything we do goes through a tasting panel all the way through the sensory panel. And it's got a terrible name, organoleptic panel.
Okay.
Which I struggle with the word organoleptic.
Sure. Not really.
But every lot gets through it. We've got a research license with Health Canada. We're allowed to do it. But it's really important that our consumers, our people, are putting something out to our consumers that's good enough.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Again, I think it is one of those things where it's not a dichotomy. I think, finding efficiency and not wasting, like you're saying, has benefits from a business perspective as well. So I think it has recently gotten kind of obscured in terms of its use, but
I try not to get upset about that. I'm like, okay, well, you can think that. That's okay. That's not what we're doing. So,
fair enough. I think that's true. All right. Some quick questions from Fabio. Thanks, Fabio. Hi, Margaret. Thanks for taking the time on this. If you had to invest money in an LP and MSO, can't be yourself, which would be hard. Of course, I know. Or what factors would you look at?
I have a few companies that I really tremendously respect. I really tremendously respect Canara, the guys out of Montreal. I think they're doing a really good job. I think that there's some, I think Motif acquisition by Organogram was very smart. I think it was a good acquisition. I think they need to get better at flour, but I will tell them that. I'll tell them that myself with a smile.
Sure.
I think their Montreal Cannabis does a good job. I've got some challenges on the balance sheet, but they're working on it. And in terms of MSOs, as soon as they're refinanced, all of them. How's that for an answer?
Fair enough. Love it. I'll take it.
I think all of them will be, but look, I've met some of the people at Kronos. They're not an MSO, but at Verano, impressive, smart people. They're going to find a way to win, even if there's some setbacks. And I think one of the things that people, I couldn't speak to today's valuation on each of them. I haven't looked at it closely enough, but there's some great things happening out there. Glass House probably would be in that list. They know how to grow.
Yeah. I would say probably someone who's been in cannabis for a while now, I feel like you probably have an additional appreciation for people who are working in the same industry, knowing how tough it is, knowing how much grit it requires to kind of get through and do well. So I think that makes sense. All right. Final question, which I think you mentioned earlier in terms of Quebec opening up on the vape side of things. Mark has a great question, which is, do you have vape products that will be available, I guess, in Quebec?
Absolutely. So here's a unique thing about what's going to happen in the Quebec market versus the rest of Canada. There will be no flavors. And I am out there and saying I don't agree with flavors in vape products, whether it's tobacco or cannabis. I don't think, whether the consumer wants it or not, I think it really appeals to youth, and that's not the way we should be going. I think cannabis should be consumed tasting like cannabis, so you understand what you're consuming. From an inhalation perspective, not on edibles. I have a different view on edibles.
Sure.
But because on inhalation, so Quebec is the one province that is not going to allow any flavors, and I'm really hopeful that they will give us a listing or two. We'll see. We can't control that. But look, we won Best New Product of the Year last year in Canada with our vape. We won Vape of the Year with our vape. They're taking great market share. We're very proud of the quality that's in them, and the product is not flavored, but it actually, to me, I think it tastes absolutely beautiful because it's the closest expression that you can get to a flower experience through the process that we're using. So I'm really, my fingers and toes are crossed on that one, but I think it will be a huge growth driver, whoever's successful with that.
That's fantastic. In terms of the market setup for Quebec, is that like an area that does tend to consume a lot on
they do, but they're buying it all from the legacy market or from Ontario right now. And so the government didn't want to go into vape. They didn't also want to go into edibles. They've only allowed edibles that don't have any sugar in them. So there's like beef jerky, and we did something fun and put poutine sauce out a few years ago, really just to say, hey, we're having fun with this.
Yeah.
And some people think that's ridiculous, and I think we got to remember cannabis is fun, right? We're not talking to you, investor. We're talking to somebody on the street who goes, yeah, try that once. That's it. It's just a limited time. Have a little fun. But look, I think what Quebec is doing is their focus, and in speaking with the leadership there, the focus is absolutely on safety. They do not want, they've assured the government, the SQDC has assured the government that no flavor will be able to be added. So like where you could pull something apart and add it in, that wouldn't happen. It would actually just sort of destroy the product if you tried to do that, because they really want to keep it away from youth. And that's the right call to my mind. I get frustrated when I walk in a cannabis store and I see all the flavored products. And we had some in our office the other day, and I was like, what's that awful smell? Someone's like, oh yeah, we have some of these samples. And I thought, I shouldn't poo-poo it because I know a lot of people love them. But to me, we're cannabis for people that love weed, right? So
don't want something that's cloyingly sweet or something that sort of overpowers, I guess, ultimately the experience.
Unless it's brown. Yeah.
Brownies? Okay, fair enough. I guess that's a classic. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's good, again, to find that competitive element, and also while still having some levity kind of to it, I think is important, and I think keeps you probably sane throughout, the journey as you go along, which is fantastic. All right, well, I think that's all I wanted to cover today, but I think it's a fantastic check-in in terms of what you guys are doing as a company, in terms of the landscape in general. I think you guys seem to continue to do a great job, which, again, thank you very much. I think it is very important to have people that are doing well, and kind of leading the way, which is fantastic. I feel like last time I asked you as well, but any product that is like top of your trying list, what's in your current
Well, I'm going to leave you
lineup?
with two final thoughts. One is, I would say, the largest companies in Canada today by market cap, or companies that kind of have morphed out of being cannabis companies in Canada, I don't think are the winners. We're either beating or right on. I think we're right on the heels of Canopy in terms of how much rec cannabis we sell, and we beat Aurora as our small company. I think companies like ours are going to emerge and win and be the great companies of the future. And secondly, our new drops under Simply Bare that are coming are incredible, the Pink Drip and Sunset Rents. But if you're in Canada and you haven't tried the 1964 newly released Blue Dream edible that's called Blue Raspberry, it's a CBG edible. It's incredible. Give it a go.
That sounds good. All right, awesome. Love it. Thank you so much. Again, thanks for the insight. It's fantastic to have you on. Thanks everyone for joining and having great questions. Really appreciate it as well. And we will catch you next time. Thanks again. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mac.
Before investing, carefully consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses found in the prospectus, available at AdvisorShares.com.